Am I the asshole for canceling my wedding after catching my fiancée cheating and refusing to pay the cost her family is demanding? Hey, before we move on to the video, please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. Thanks. This is going to be long, but I need to get this off my chest because I'm still dealing with the aftermath 2 years later and people keep telling me I'm the asshole. I, 32M, met Sarah, 29F, 3 years ago through mutual friends. She came from money, her dad owns several car dealerships, and her mom comes from old money. I'm a software engineer making decent money, around $95,000, but nothing compared to their wealth. From day one, her family made it clear they thought she was settling. Her parents, Robert and Patricia, were polite but cold. Her dad would make comments about how interesting it was that I drove a Honda Civic instead of something more substantial. Her mom would ask pointed questions about my 5-year plan and whether I thought I could provide adequately for Sarah. Her younger brother Jake, 26M, was the worst, constantly making jokes about how Sarah was slumming it with a middle-class guy. But Sarah seemed different around me. She said she was tired of dating trust fund babies and wanted someone real. She claimed her family's attitude didn't matter and that she loved me for who I was. I believed her completely. After dating for 8 months, I proposed. I'd saved up for months to buy her a ring. Not huge by her family's standards, but it cost me $8,000, which was significant for me. She said yes, and I thought her family would finally accept me. I was wrong. The problem started immediately with wedding planning. Sarah's mom Patricia took over everything, insisting on vendors I'd never heard of, venues that cost more than my annual salary, and a guest list of 300 people. When I saw the preliminary budget of $120,000, I nearly choked. This is completely out of my price range, I told Sarah privately. Can we scale this back? Sarah got upset and said her parents offered to pay for some of it, but then Patricia called me directly. Michael, she said in that fake sweet voice, Robert and I have been talking. We think it's important for a man to provide for his wedding. It shows character and commitment. We're willing to contribute, but we think you should cover the majority of the costs. After all, you're taking our daughter off our hands. I tried to explain that $120,000 was more than my entire annual salary after taxes, but Patricia cut me off. Sarah has certain expectations. She's been dreaming of this wedding since she was a little girl. Surely you don't want to disappoint her on the most important day of her life? What kind of husband would that make you? When I talked to Sarah about it, she started crying. I've literally dreamed about this wedding my entire life. My parents spent thousands on my debut, my sweet 16, everything. This is supposed to be the most special day ever. Don't you love me enough to make this happen? The emotional manipulation was intense. She'd alternate between tears and accusations that I didn't truly love her if I wasn't willing to invest in our wedding. Her family started making comments about how cheap I was being and how Sarah deserved better. Against every financial instinct I had, I agreed to pay for the wedding. I took out a $50,000 personal loan, emptied my savings account, cashed out my 401k early with penalties, and put another $30,000 on credit cards. The total came to $78,000 after her parents generously contributed $42,000. The planning process was a nightmare. Every decision had to go through Patricia, who had expensive taste and no consideration for my budget. When I suggested cost-saving alternatives, I was shot down immediately. Michael, darling, you can't serve chicken at a wedding. The beef tenderloin is non-negotiable. We can't possibly have roses from the grocery store florist. Sarah deserves peonies from the premium designer. A DJ? Absolutely not. Sarah needs the 12-piece orchestra. Every vendor meeting was humiliating. Patricia would introduce me as the future son-in-law who's handling the finances with a tone that made it clear she thought I was inadequate. The vendors would look at me with pity when I had to ask about payment plans. Sarah seemed oblivious to my stress. She was caught up in dress shopping, cake tastings, and bridal showers. When I tried to talk to her about how the debt was affecting me, she'd brush it off. It's just money, Michael. We'll pay it back eventually. This is a once-in-a-lifetime event. Meanwhile, I was working overtime constantly, picking up freelance projects, and selling everything I owned of value just to make the vendor payments. I was barely sleeping and living on ramen noodles while paying for a wedding that cost more than most people's cars. 3 months before the wedding, Sarah started acting strange. She'd be secretive with her phone, take calls in another room, and go out with friends more often. When I asked about it, she said wedding planning was stressing her out and she needed space to decompress. I found out later she'd been decompressing with her ex-boyfriend Marcus. Marcus was everything her family wanted for her. Old money, went to the right schools, drove the right car. They dated for 2 years in college before he moved to California for work. Apparently, he'd moved back to town 6 months before our wedding and reached out to Sarah on social media. The night before our wedding, I couldn't sleep. All the vendors were paid, the guests were in town, and I was $78,000 in debt for a party that would last 6 hours. I decided to go for a drive to clear my head. I ended up driving past the hotel where our out-of-town guests were staying, including Marcus, who was Sarah's friend from college that I'd been told I had to invite. As I pulled into the parking lot, I saw Sarah's car. My heart sank, but I told myself there was probably an innocent explanation. Maybe she was checking on out-of-town guests or dealing with some last-minute wedding emergency. I used the key card she'd given me to check on things and went up to Marcus's room. The door was slightly ajar, and I could hear voices inside. When I pushed it open, I found my fiancée naked in bed with her ex-boyfriend less than 12 hours before our wedding. The confrontation was brutal. Sarah started crying immediately, saying it just happened and that she was confused about her feelings. Marcus had the audacity to tell me I should step aside because he and Sarah had real history together. "This doesn't have to ruin everything," Sarah sobbed. "It was a mistake. We can still get married tomorrow and work through this." I was so shocked I could barely speak. When I finally found my voice, I told her the wedding was off and left. But the nightmare was just beginning. The next morning, Patricia called me screaming, "You will not embarrass this family by canceling this wedding. Do you have any idea how much money has been spent? How many people are here? You're being completely unreasonable." When I explained that I caught Sarah cheating, Patricia's response floored me. "So what? She made a mistake. Marriage is about forgiveness. You're throwing away your future over one little indiscretion." Robert got on the phone and threatened to sue me for the full cost of the wedding if I didn't go through with it. "You signed contracts with vendors. People traveled here. You have financial obligations whether you're mad at Sarah or not." The extended family started calling. Sarah's aunts, uncles, and cousins all told me I was being dramatic and cruel. Several people told me that Sarah's indiscretion was probably my fault for not being attentive enough during the stressful wedding planning period. Jake, Sarah's brother, was the worst. He actually came to my apartment and told me, "Look, we all know you're not good enough for Sarah anyway. Marcus is back now, so why don't you just step aside gracefully? You can't seriously think you're better for her than he is." The pressure was incredible. I had 200+ people asking me what was happening. Vendors calling about setup times. A wedding party confused about whether to get ready. And Sarah's family threatening legal action if I didn't go through with the ceremony. Sarah herself kept calling, alternating between apologies and anger. "You're being so selfish. Think about everyone who traveled here. Think about all the money. We can work through this, but not if you humiliate me by canceling everything." When I refused to budge, Robert made good on his threat. He had his lawyer send me a letter demanding $78,000 for breach of contract and intentional infliction of emotional distress on the family. The letter claimed that since I was the one who canceled the wedding, I was responsible for all non-refundable costs. But it got worse. Since most vendors had been paid already and it was too late to cancel, the wedding reception happened anyway. Sarah's family told guests that I had abandoned Sarah at the altar and that they were supporting her through this difficult time. Marcus stepped in as her date for the reception. I found out later from a mutual friend who attended that Patricia gave a speech about how the family was so proud of Sarah for dodging a bullet and how some people show their true character under pressure. The whole thing was positioned as Sarah being the victim of my cruel abandonment. The social media posts were devastating. Pictures of Sarah looking beautiful and tragic, surrounded by supportive family and friends. Captions about moving forward and knowing your worth. Meanwhile, I was painted as the villain who broke her heart and wasted everyone's time and money. The legal battle consumed the next 8 months of my life. Robert hired an expensive law firm and dragged me through hell. They subpoenaed my financial records, demanded depositions, and filed motions claiming I owed not just the wedding costs but additional damages for emotional distress and reputational harm to Sarah. I had to hire my own lawyer with money I didn't have. The legal fees added another $15,000 to my debt. During depositions, Robert's lawyers painted me as an unreliable partner who used Sarah's infidelity as an excuse to escape financial obligations. The worst part was that Sarah testified against me. Under oath, she claimed that our relationship had been troubled for months and that her night with Marcus was the result of my emotional neglect and financial stress. She actually argued that I had driven her to infidelity through my behavior. Her family's lawyer argued that regardless of Sarah's actions, I had entered into binding contracts with vendors and had a legal obligation to pay. They claimed that personal relationship issues didn't void financial commitments. After months of legal hell, we reached a settlement. I agreed to pay $45,000 of the wedding costs in exchange for them dropping additional damage claims. It was either that or risk a trial where I might have been ordered to pay even more. Meanwhile, my credit was destroyed. I'd maxed out credit cards, defaulted on the personal loan, and had to declare bankruptcy. I lost my apartment and had to move back in with my parents at age 31. My credit score dropped to 480. But the worst part was the social fallout. Sarah's family had poisoned the well with our mutual friends. The story they told was that I was an unreliable person who had used Sarah and then abandoned her when things got tough. Several friends stopped talking to me entirely. Marcus and Sarah got engaged 3 months after our canceled wedding. Patricia posted on Facebook about how grateful they were that Sarah had found her true soulmate and how everything happens for a reason. The engagement ring Marcus gave her was easily 3 times the size of the one I'd bought. For over a year, I was financially and emotionally destroyed. I had to take a second job delivering food at night to pay my legal fees and try to rebuild my credit. I was living in my childhood bedroom, driving my parents' old car, and eating dinner with them every night like I was 15 again. The depression was crushing. I'd lost my fiancée, my financial stability, my apartment, my social circle, and my reputation all in one horrible weekend. Some days I could barely get out of bed. But slowly, things started to turn around. First, I got promoted at work. My boss had been understanding about my situation and appreciated that I'd never let my personal problems affect my job performance. The promotion came with a $25,000 raise. Then I started therapy, which helped me process the trauma and manipulation I'd experienced. My therapist helped me understand that what Sarah and her family had done was financial abuse and emotional manipulation, not just wedding stress. I also started dating again. At first, I was terrified of getting involved with anyone, but I met Lisa, 28F, through a hiking group. She was a teacher from a middle-class family like mine, and she was horrified when I eventually told her my story. "They made you pay for a wedding to someone who was cheating on you, then sued you when you wouldn't go through with it," she said. "That's not normal, Michael. That's not how decent people behave." Lisa helped me rebuild my confidence and reminded me that not all relationships involve financial manipulation and emotional abuse. Meanwhile, karma was working behind the scenes. About 18 months after our canceled wedding, I started hearing rumors through mutual acquaintances that Marcus and Sarah's relationship wasn't going well. Apparently, Marcus had a gambling problem that Sarah's family hadn't known about. Then, 2 years after everything went down, I got a series of text messages that changed everything. The first was from Jake, Sarah's brother. "Hey Michael, I know we haven't talked, but I wanted to reach out. Some stuff has come to light about Sarah and Marcus that I think you should know. Can we meet for coffee?" I ignored it. The next day, Sarah herself texted, "Michael, I've been thinking about everything that happened between us. I realize now that I made some terrible mistakes. Could we talk? I'd like to explain some things and apologize properly." I ignored that too. Then Patricia, of all people, called and left a voicemail. "Michael, dear, I hope you're doing well. I know there was some unpleasantness between our families, but I'm hoping we can put that behind us. Sarah has been asking about you, and I think it would be good for everyone if we could all sit down and clear the air." Finally, my curiosity got the better of me, and I called Jake back. "Dude, you dodged the biggest bullet of your life," he said immediately. "I owe you an apology." We all do. It turned out that Marcus had been lying about his financial situation from the beginning. He'd been living off credit and family money while pretending to have a successful investment career. 6 months after marrying Sarah, his debts caught up with him. Marcus had gambled away not just his own money, but he'd also stolen from Sarah's trust fund that her grandparents had left her. We're talking about $200,000 that he'd lost on cryptocurrency and sports betting. But it got worse. Marcus had also been cheating on Sarah throughout their marriage with multiple women. When Sarah found out about both the gambling and the cheating, she filed for divorce. The divorce was messy and public. Marcus's financial crimes made the local news because he'd also embezzled money from his employer. Sarah had to testify in court about how he'd forged her signature to access her trust fund. The cherry on top? Marcus left Sarah with massive debts. As his wife, she was liable for some of his gambling debts and credit card bills. Her family had to spend a fortune on lawyers to protect their assets from his creditors. Sarah's been a wreck, Jake told me. She keeps saying she threw away the best relationship she ever had for a con man. Mom and Dad are furious because they pushed her toward Marcus, and now they're out hundreds of thousands of dollars cleaning up his mess. Jake explained that the family had started to realize how badly they treated me. We always thought you weren't good enough for Sarah because you didn't have money. But Marcus showed us that having money doesn't make someone a good person. You were honest, hardworking, and loyal. We were idiots. After Jake's call, the messages from Sarah's family intensified. Robert sent a long email apologizing for any misunderstandings and suggesting we let bygones be bygones. Patricia left several voicemails talking about how much they missed having me around and how they'd learned some hard lessons about character versus wealth. Sarah's messages became increasingly desperate. She admitted that cheating on me was the biggest mistake of her life and that she'd realized I was the only man who ever truly loved her for who she was. She begged for a chance to make things right and suggested we could start over. The most ridiculous message came from Marcus himself, who was apparently trying to make amends as part of some court-ordered therapy program. He sent a long letter taking responsibility for interfering in my relationship with Sarah and acknowledging that I was the better man. But by then, I was in a completely different place in my life. I'd been promoted again at work and was making $130,000 a year. Lisa and I had moved in together and were talking about marriage. I'd bought a house, with Lisa as a co-buyer to help with my still recovering credit, and I was genuinely happy for the first time in years. More importantly, I'd learned to recognize manipulation and abuse. Everything Sarah's family was doing now, the sudden respect, the apologies, the attempts to reconnect, was just another form of manipulation. They weren't sorry for how they'd treated me. They were sorry that their golden boy had turned out to be a criminal. When Sarah showed up at my workplace uninvited, I knew I had to set firm boundaries. "I'm glad you're doing well," I told her calmly, "but I'm not interested in reconnecting. What happened between us is in the past, and I'd like to keep it there." Sarah started crying and launched into a speech about how she'd grown as a person and realized that money doesn't matter. She said she was willing to sign a prenup if we got back together and that her family would pay me back every penny I'd lost on our wedding. "I don't want your family's money," I told her. "I want you to leave me alone." When she wouldn't stop calling and texting, I had to block her number and social media accounts. Her family continued reaching out through mutual friends and even tried to contact Lisa directly to explain the situation. Finally, I sent one group email to Robert, Patricia, Jake, and Sarah. "I appreciate that you've all realized Marcus wasn't the person you thought he was. However, that doesn't change how you treated me when I was part of your family. You made me go into debt for a wedding to someone who was cheating on me, then sued me when I refused to go through with the ceremony. You told our mutual friends that I was unreliable and cruel. You damaged my reputation and my finances because you cared more about appearances than about what was right. I've moved on with my life, and I'm happy now. I wish you all well, but I'm not interested in rekindling any relationships. Please respect my boundaries and stop contacting me." That mostly stopped the direct contact, but I still hear through mutual friends that Sarah struggles with dating because of her reputation in our social circle. Apparently, most guys in town know about what happened with Marcus and are wary of getting involved with someone whose family is known for financial manipulation. Patricia and Robert's reputation also took a hit. People talk about how they pushed their daughter toward a con man while driving away a decent guy who truly loved her. Their social circle is smaller now, and several people have distanced themselves from the family. Meanwhile, Lisa and I got engaged last month. We're planning a small wedding with just close family and friends. Total budget under $10,000. Lisa's parents are lovely people who welcomed me immediately and never once questioned whether I was good enough for their daughter. Sometimes I think about how different my life would have been if I'd gone through with marrying Sarah. I would have been trapped in a marriage with someone who didn't respect me, surrounded by in-laws who saw me as inadequate. Instead, I'm with someone who loves and values me, and I've learned to spot red flags before they destroy my life. But I still get angry when I think about how Sarah's family treated me. They put me through financial and legal hell because I wouldn't marry someone who cheated on me. They damaged my reputation and cost me friendships because protecting their image was more important than doing what was right. The settlement money they're offering now doesn't erase the year I spent living with my parents, working 2 jobs, and fighting bankruptcy. It doesn't give me back the friendships I lost or undo the damage to my credit score. Most of all, it doesn't change the fact that they only realized I was a good person after their golden boy turned out to be a criminal. If Marcus had been faithful and financially stable, they'd still think I was the inadequate loser who wasn't good enough for their daughter. So am I the asshole for refusing to forgive them and move on? Part of me wonders if I should take the high road and accept their apologies. But a bigger part of me thinks that some betrayals are too deep to forgive, and some people only learn respect through consequences. I'm happy with my choice, but I wanted to get some outside perspective. What would you do in my situation? Update. Thank you everyone for the overwhelming support. I showed Lisa this post and some of the comments, and she said you all confirmed what she's been telling me for months, that I don't owe these people anything. A few people asked about the legal aspects. Yes, I could probably sue them for malicious prosecution and emotional distress now that I have more resources, but my lawyer advised against it. The settlement agreement I signed has some provisions that would make it complicated, and more importantly, I don't want these people in my life in any capacity, even as defendants in a lawsuit. Someone also asked if Sarah's family ever paid for Marcus's wedding to her. They did. Apparently another $90,000 plus event that they're now calling the most expensive mistake we ever made. As for Sarah herself, I heard through a mutual friend that she's in therapy and has apparently told people she understands now why I can't forgive her. I hope therapy helps her, but it doesn't change anything for me. Lisa and I are doing great. We're looking at venues for our small wedding, and honestly, I'm more excited about marrying her than I ever was about the big production Sarah wanted. Sometimes the best revenge really is living well. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button.